joined by our panelists here. So we only have about an hour for this conversation. So I'll ask some questions, give you all a chunk of time to answer them, and then we'll have about 10 minutes for audience questions. Okay, and with that, I'd love to start by introducing Jessica Sager, co-founder and CEO of All Our Kin. She has worked tirelessly to advocate for early childhood care and education as foundational to setting students up with the early learning experiences that lay the groundwork for achievement in school and beyond. All Our Kin works to ensure children have this foundation by training and supporting family child care providers. Dr. Dolores Garcia Blocker is a lifelong educator with more than 30 years of experience working and leading in public school systems. She now leads Teach for America in Connecticut and is focused on building a robust teacher pipeline in our state. She and TFA are on a mission to build a network of leaders working to expand access to opportunity for students. Last but certainly not least, Dr. Miguel Cardona. Before we knew him as the 12th U.S. Secretary of Education under Biden, he was an award-winning school principal, teacher, and district leader and commissioner of education in our very own Connecticut. Among many things, during his time as Secretary of Ed, he focused on higher ed accountability as well as improving access to it as a means to economic mobility for students in the country. Now, thank you all again for being here. I'm going to start by asking you each to ground us in the work you've all been leading for these many years with one foundational question, and that is, what is foundational for us to understand about education from where you sit? And I'm going to start with our littlest learners first, Jessica.
So I am so happy to be here with all of you in a panel that is about education. For a really long time, is the mic working? Thank you. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. So for a really long time, we've maintained this collective fiction as a society that children start learning the day they walk in the door of kindergarten. And I have talked to some of you in the audience, and I know you know that that's not true. Children are learning from the day that they are born. In fact, their brains are literally built in the earliest years. 90% of a child's brain architecture is built before the age of 5. And it's not just cognitive development, it is early literacy, it is early numeracy, but it's also all the things that shape the kind of person a child is going to grow up to become. It's about empathy, it's about self-efficacy, a sense of your effectiveness in the world, it's about trust and interest in learning and joy. All these things happen in early childhood education, or as we often call it, childcare. And the problem is that childcare in the United States is a disaster. I used to say the childcare system in the US was broken, and then I realized that was giving us too much credit. We don't have a childcare system. We have an unfunded, fragmented mess. And as a result, childcare is incredibly expensive, usually more than the cost of public college tuition. It's incredibly hard to find. In fact, there are 4 million children in this country that have no access to childcare at all. And if you have an infant and toddler, or if you work evenings and weekends, or your first language is in English, or you have transportation barriers, it gets even harder to find care. So I want to center us in the importance of childcare. And within childcare, I want to talk about family childcare educators. So family childcare educators are women all across the United States who open their homes to provide care for the children of their neighborhoods. In every neighborhood of the US, you will find these childcare micro-businesses. And the women running these businesses are teachers and leaders and business people. But we have neglected them and left them out of our childcare systems, our funding, our training, and our policies for far too long. In a system where no teacher is fairly paid, where no teacher has full access to training, family childcare educators have historically gotten the fewest resources at all. So at my organization, All Our Kin, what we have done is build a best-in-class model to show what it looks like when you actually invest in and support family childcare educators. That means helping them meet state licensing standards and get set up. It means bringing them the very best knowledge, the latest knowledge of child development, which is always changing. We have some experts here, delivered with best-in-class adult learning theory. And it means training them to succeed as business people so they can earn a living and build wealth for themselves and for their families. We have shown at All Our Kin that when you build this kind of system, you can transform the supply of childcare. You can ensure that parents have access to quality childcare. And you can also ensure that educators can earn a living, keep their programs open, and even begin to build wealth for themselves and their families. So when we think about education, I want us to think about this childcare ecosystem. And I want you to imagine what it is like to walk into a family childcare program where you might see an educator with a baby on her lap and she's reading a book to them. And you might see some toddlers filling shoes with pebbles to learn about math and spatial relations. And you might see an educator making an extra plate of dinner for a parent who she knows is working second shift. You might see a child who has special needs and developmental delays who's getting the care and love that she can't get anywhere else because nowhere else can give her that kind of individualized attention. The All Our Kin model is supporting these educators. We've shown we can do it. We started here in New Haven, but we work now with about 1,000 family childcare educators in New York City and Connecticut. And each of them is providing a wonderful, high-quality learning experience to the children in their care and the children of their neighborhoods. We've even begun training agencies across the country because our model's gotten a lot of attention. We have cumulatively over 150 agencies in over 34 states that are implementing the All Our Kin model. But what I want to say to you today is we can only go so far with private funding. So when we think about innovation, I hope that everyone here will consider what it might look like to explore publicly funding childcare the way that we fund K through 12. We're seeing some exciting initiatives here in Connecticut, a historic childcare endowment, and there is still a really long way to go in this country. So that is my first charge to you as you think about education. Public funding for the early years is innovation. The second is, if you are an innovator and you're designing a really cool product, think about how it might be useful to early childhood educators, and especially family childcare educators in your community, and build an application that's inclusive, because that's where the children and families in greatest need are. And the last thing I want to say is, if you want to be inspired around innovation, the best thing you can do is spend a day at a family childcare program and see the extraordinary learning experiences that educators are building for children with very few resources, but incredible creativity and dedication every single day. Thank you.
I have one follow-up. So I'm sure there are examples of countries who do this better than us. Could you walk us through some of those examples and maybe talk a little bit about why it is that we continue to treat early childhood education as a private family matter?
Yeah, so let me start with the why of early childhood education, because I think there are a lot of pieces to this, and I think it's valuable to name them. So part of it is people just not understanding brain development, right? It's like you don't really get that children are learning. But I don't think that's actually our biggest challenge. I think we have some really deep-rooted fundamental beliefs. There are a lot of folks who believe that women should be home with kids. That's not today's reality, and they don't want to fund childcare. I think we have a system that, in full transparency, was built on exploiting the unpaid labor of Black women who were enslaved, and later the undervalued labor of brown women. And the whole system is built on that construction and is systematically devalued because of racism and xenophobia. And then finally, I think we have this belief in this country that it's every person for themselves. And the idea that we might come together collectively to care for each other's children, that's a big stretch for us, which is really sad, because in the other countries with our levels of wealth, they spend on average $14,000 per year per child. That's public dollars. Here in the US, we spend $500. That's the kind of difference we're talking about. Denmark is a great example of a country that has an inclusive childcare system that includes, by the way, family childcare. And I do want to shout out that there are states here in the US that are doing this work. New Mexico has made a commitment to universal childcare. Vermont has made a commitment to universal childcare. New York is working towards universal childcare, and that's where we're trying to go in Connecticut too. So I think state by state, region by region, there's a growing acknowledgement of just how necessary this is, and it is my great hope that we will continue to see future progress.
Thank you, Jessica. All right, I'll turn it to you. From your perspective, from a K through 12 perspective.
So, good afternoon, everyone. I'm here to represent the teacher talent pipeline. And I'm sure we all know that any organization can have the best plans, the best technology, the best everything, but if there is not a solid talent there to drive it, it will all fall apart. And so I'm here as Executive Director of Teach for America Connecticut. As Suaz said, I've been a K-12 public educator for over 30 years, been in public schools all my life. I've been a teacher, a building leader, a chief of staff, chief academic officer, started my career in Washington, D.C. public schools. I've been in New York and now here in Connecticut. So in 2021, made the decision, now that I'm toward the end of my career, that I wanted to have more of a statewide impact. And a friend of mine here at Yale encouraged me to take a look at Teach for America. And lo and behold, there was an opening. And so here I am with a very real focus on local recruitment of folks from Connecticut, back to Connecticut, to stay in Connecticut, to make a difference in the communities here. So at Teach for America, what we do, we have 40-something regions across the country. We recruit at college campuses, the top campuses in the country. We recruit the best, the brightest leaders to come into education, to serve 2 years minimally in an urban district, a rural district, or a native district. And to commit to 2 years, during that time, they are the teacher of record. They're not a paraeducator. They're nothing less than a teacher, paid as a teacher for 2 years. While they're teaching, they are also learning, they're doing their master's program in Connecticut to earn their certification. Teacher certification varies state to state to state. Some states, you just take a test and all of a sudden you're a teacher. In Connecticut, you have to go through a 2-year certification program that requires the master's degree. And so as a way to introduce this piece, I would really like to share a quick story. And that is the story of a person on staff who is our vice president of recruitment. She lives here in Connecticut. She was in college. Teach for America heavily recruited her, and she said no. Because she was pursuing her 4-year bachelor's degree in education. And the thing that we do at Teach for America, we recruit math majors, science majors, any major, it doesn't matter, we recruit all of them. But she was an education major and felt that she did not need Teach for America to help her. And so Teach for America continued to recruit. She kept saying no, landed at a school. She was here in Connecticut, landed at a school in Connecticut, in New Haven, alongside a first-year Teach for America core member. So we call our 2-year teachers core members until after that, then they become alums. But she was working alongside this Teach for America core member as a first-year teacher. What she saw happening in that classroom blew her mind. This Teach for America core member was getting regular coaching support from her Teach for America coach. She was getting regular feedback in her classroom about what was going well, what was not going well. She was attending Saturday sessions with all of the Teach for America core members in the state of Connecticut. She was assigned a mentor who mentored and coached this person. She was getting all kinds of resources. What was she getting? With her 4-year bachelor's degree in education and all the answers on how to teach, drive-by observations, no meaningful connections, and she was really upset about what she was getting as a first-year educator and what this person right next to her was getting as a first-year educator, but a Teach for America core member. And so here she is now in Connecticut, recruiting on college campuses, overseeing recruiting on college campuses across the country. And I will talk more if the questions come up about what supports are really needed for first year and early educators. And it's no different from the supports and attention being paid and given to any entry-level employees at any organization that really value their employees and want to keep them on staff for the long term.
Well, I was going to ask that as a follow-up, if you want to start talking about that. Basically, thank you for sharing that story because it highlights that we feel that these educators are important and yet they are so often unsupported. So can you talk a little bit about why that continues to be and if there are certain levers that are starting to be pulled now where you feel like that is improving in certain parts of the country?
So I will talk about what we do at Teach for America for our core members. And it's really no different, like I said, what other organizations, other fields, other industries do when they value the people that are in front of them and they want to retain them. So our folks get ongoing coaching. They are hungry for feedback. Most people want feedback. They want feedback on what they're doing well, how they can grow. They want it from the students, they want it from their colleagues, they want it from the administrators. We also provide mental health supports, which is something that is fairly new. When I was an educator, we just had to grind it out. There was figure it out, go home, have a cocktail, do whatever you're going to do, and come back. No, these young people are very clear about their mental health, their wellness, and expect to be supported. So there are all kinds of supports we wrap around our core members. And so the bottom line is there is an ecosystem of support that early career people need, no matter what the industry is, but definitely in education. And sometimes it's super hard for that to happen. But if people are very serious about retention, not just recruitment, not just professional development, but if people are very serious about retention of early career educators in the long term, which is what school districts need, because the constant pouring in of investments and then they leave and go to another district or they leave and go to another, that's not fair. And that's definitely not fair to kids.
Thank you, Lola. All right, I'll pass it to Miguel.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. You could have gone to cocktail hour, but you chose happy hour instead, and you're here. Really happy to share the stage with Jessica and Dolores, and the passion that you have for the work you do is palpable, and I appreciate that. Thank you for the invitation. You know, the foundational question, right? First of all, I'm just glad you changed the slides because I promise you I have more than one suit. I noticed the picture that I was the same suit. I'm like, I get nervous when I pick out this suit. I'm like, is it gonna? Yeah. So the picture. Thank you for changing the slide. Look, I've been blessed to serve in so many different roles, and I see folks in the room who I've had the pleasure of learning with and working alongside over the years. I've been blessed to be a beneficiary of public schools. 45 years ago, I was walking into kindergarten as an English learner, Hispanic, economically disadvantaged kid whose parents were not afforded the opportunity to finish high school. I went to John Berry Elementary School in Meriden. At the time, probably one of the lowest performing schools in the city, if not the state. In Meriden, to this day, one of the least funded districts in the state. That's home. That's where I still live, never moved since birth. I'm a product of the public education system. I'm a big believer in choice, contrary to what Fox might tell you. And I chose to go to a technical high school. I was fixing cars for 4 years at a state technical high school because my eldest cousin went to that school. So, big Puerto Rican families, you just follow what the eldest cousin does. And like a duck's crossing the road, I followed him into that school. And I was fixing cars for 4 years. And then I had a teacher tap me on the shoulder and say, Miguel, you could be a teacher if you want. It was an art teacher who saw that I was using my artwork to talk about social justice. I had only what the local public schools provided. I didn't have the luxury of after-school programming that my parents brought me to, or elite soccer teams, or whatever. I had what my neighborhood school provided. I applied to one college, and I got in. It was Central Connecticut State University. I walked in as a 17-year-old with imposter syndrome, and I walked out with a future. The state college here in Connecticut. Went on and got my graduate work at UConn. And I share this to share that in this chapter of my life, defending public education is my calling. The imperfect system that 50 million students in this country benefit from. Sounds cliche, but I'll say it. It is the great equalizer. It is what the majority of students in this country have in order to reach their God-given potential. And I mentioned state colleges because I didn't have a lot of options. I didn't fill out FAFSA because I didn't want to put it on my parents' plate and embarrass them because they would have had a hard time filling it out. There are millions of kids with more potential than me walking into our public schools every day. And I was given the opportunity to serve and make decisions in the Oval Office for 65 million students across the country as a product of a public school that many people would buy houses outside of that district. That, to me, is what I choose to focus on now, while it's under attack, while many are questioning whether or not we should even invest in it, while many parts of our country are looking to fund options that provide choice for the private schools that choose which kids they want to take. The foundation of education, in my opinion, to answer your question is, look, this is a people business. Regardless of what advancement or disruption, whatever you want to call it, this is a people business. I know everyone's thinking, how is artificial intelligence going to impact education? Do we embrace it? Do we block it? Do we put our phones away, or do we teach how to utilize AI to be more efficient so that our kids could compete with kids across the world? But I'm going to go back and say, this is a people business. And if we lose sight of that, public education and education in general runs the risk of going off the rails, in some cases even further than it is now. So in the face of fears, and we see robots outside and Teslas all over the place, this is a people business. And it's, in my opinion, the best defense that our country has, both in K-12 or pre-K-12 and in higher education. And while I see a storm brewing and higher education is under attack and college presidents are doing their best to stay under the radar and not be seen. And many states in our country are doing their best to get in line with things that maybe even contradict their ideals. I say we have an opportunity. 6 years ago, we faced the impossible. 6 years ago, we were hunkered in our basement, trying to figure out if we're going to make it. And I argue that this is kind of that was preparation for this storm. It is on us, it is our responsibility, our privilege, to be able to defend public education and institutions of higher education at a time when they're under attack throughout our country. And in order to get past this storm, I would argue it's not going to be AI. It's going to be our humanity and our ability to connect with people again. Who better than educators and maybe the arts to bring people together in a way that we long for, that we haven't seen in maybe 1 or 2 generations. So to answer your question, the foundation for me is this is a people business, and it's going to take people coming together to get us to better days.
Thank you. Okay. I want to start with my next kind of foundational question, which is looking forward a bit to the world we are in now. And you already started talking about this a bit. The world we are in now and where we are heading. Please describe, if we get serious about building an education system around how children and families live and learn, what do we need to start with? What are the challenges that exist today? And where are we perhaps over-indexed on innovation in education? And what are the levers we can pull?
Good for me?
Yes, for everyone else.
So, I just want to take a quick minute to kind of share my framing of AI because it's on top of mind everywhere. I recently did a podcast or a webinar where, I feel like we must embrace it in order to give our students a fighting chance to be globally competitive. But we have to learn lessons from what we didn't do right in the last 2 iterations of technological advancement that came overnight. And I'll give you a quick example. I was back in the 90s, I was a 4th grade teacher back in the 1900s, and you remember the internet came out, right? And I was a 4th grade teacher, and I remember I was that teacher. I was a young, 21, 22-year-old teacher, late 90s. I wanted that iMac computer in my room, the big green one. That was a cool teacher, right? And Oregon Trail, that was like, if your kids did Oregon Trail, you're the cool teacher, right?
I lost my accent.
So it was great because it gave kids an exposure to things that they wouldn't see. Kids were able to walk through the Smithsonian without leaving Meriden, Connecticut, because they don't have money for a bus ticket. There were some good things. But the bad, kids saw things they shouldn't see. Pornography. They saw things and read things that they shouldn't have seen then. It was a missed opportunity to put in safeguards and protect children. Fast forward 15 years, 2010s. Social media explodes. And there's so much good to it too. I was able to talk to cousins in Puerto Rico that I hadn't seen in 20 years and connect with friends that I hadn't seen, and it's such a good thing. Yet, it contributed to a youth mental health crisis where in 2021, 1 in 3 high school girls considered suicide. Again, there's good to it, social media, but without guardrails, it hurt children. This is chapter 3. And I've been fortunate to have this conversation with the president of Google, vice presidents of Meta, to say, hey, even TikTok, hey, this is great. Artificial intelligence could help make us more efficient. It's great. However, what are you doing to protect children based on what we've learned from the lessons in the internet or social media advancements? This is chapter 3. And I hate to say, but I see a lot of ring kissing. I don't see enough action. So part of my thinking now is let's not wait for them. You saw what the Attorney General presented this morning or yesterday about Roblox, right? there's tremendous good. And let's face it, this is the currency of communication for children. To act like they're not going to do it is foolish. Do we teach them the digital citizenry to do it well and to be growing, or do we act like it's not happening under our noses and have them do it without any guardrails, without any protections? Shame on us if we remove ourselves from that responsibility to help usher this new technology in safely, to enhance our work. So I think that's something that we have an opportunity. We're here at an innovation summit. Maybe the innovation isn't the thing, but it's how we engage the thing to preserve our youth, preserve our country's growth, prevent it from going south like social media did for so many of our kids, how the internet did for so many of our kids. Maybe the innovation isn't the what, but it's the how. I'm thinking about Simon Sinek's model, right? We have a shared why of wanting our kids to do well. Sometimes we get lost with the shiny new thing in front of us or the self-driving car. But maybe it's not the what that is the innovation. It's how we collectively engage with one another to learn from the mistakes and be innovative about how we usher something in for the good of humanity. That's kind of where I want to push education in this next chapter.
You want me to go? Okay. I'm actually going to pull together a lot of the themes that we've heard over the course of the conversation. There's a woman named Isabel Howe at the Stanford Center for Acceleration in Education, and she's written a really beautiful book called Love to Learn. And in that book, she says two things. The first thing she says is that in the age of artificial intelligence, the single most important kind of intelligence we as humans can have is relational intelligence. That is how we relate to one another, how we understand and connect. So that's the first thing she says. But the second thing she says, and the brain research will bear this out, is that all learning is grounded in relationships. Children learn best when they are with someone they love who cares for them. And that's true for adults too. Artificial intelligence and technology can never replace those relationships, no matter how hard we try. And I was so struck when I listened to you talk about the supports you offer at TFA, because it's so similar to what we do at All Our Kin and what anyone engaged in the pursuit of learning does. That is to engage with educators fully as human beings and provide the very best training and support and recognition and acknowledgement and connection around everything from mental health to skills and knowledge. So there's a saying that I really love from reflective practice, and it says, do unto others as you would have them do unto others. And we can only ask teachers to show up with love and attention and intentionality for children if they themselves are supported, if they have the ability to connect with their peers and to learn and to feel seen and to feel valued every single day. We can use technology to facilitate that, absolutely. We at All Our Kin have a really cool pilot right now with the Harvard Graduate School of Education. It's a remote coaching pilot where educators who are like too far for a coach to come to their programs, they have someone popping in on video, and it's a beautiful thing. But we've seen other cases where people use technology to shortcut the human connection. And the result is educators are shortchanged and children are too. So technology can neither substitute for the educator, nor can it substitute for the learning that that educator needs. The last thing I want to say is, I was so struck when you spoke about the art teacher who saw potential in you, because I've been thinking about this a lot. In Isabel's book, Love to Learn, she actually goes to an All Our Kin family childcare program. She sees this educator caring for a young child. She doesn't know it, but it's a young child who has autism. The educator has actually taught this child to speak. And what Isabel doesn't know is that after she left, I heard this educator say to this child, I see you, Naraya. I see you. And I've been thinking a lot about that power of being seen, because I know for myself, all our kin would not exist if there were not a few people who had looked me in the eye and said, I see you. I know it was true for my daughter. I'm guessing it was true for you as well. Teachers need to be seen so that they can see children. And again, the question is, what are the structures, the systems, the technologies, the support that enable and facilitate and smooth the way for that to happen without replacing it or adding layers between human beings?
Being seen, valued, heard is so important. And when I think about what's needed, where I see teachers thriving, kids thriving, it's where that is happening. And so we designed so many schools and opportunities and experiences for kids and families without them even being at the table. And all of that stuff just falls flat. And so if we're really going to do this right and do it well, we must have students and families at the table. And when I think about two teachers in particular, both of them science teachers here in New Haven, both of them graduates of Yale, and what they are doing in their classrooms is just unbelievable. One of them is a middle school science teacher here in New Haven, and she just doesn't teach middle school students science. She teaches them to be scientists. She values them in that way, and so their approach and their work in the classroom is not just about experiments and doing things. They are doing that work from the lens of being a scientist. And I just see these young seventh graders coming to life, and how many of them now see themselves as scientists because their teacher sees them that way and creates lessons and opportunities and experiences for them to experience that. The other person, I am just blown away by her. She's at Wilbercross. Wilbercross is a neighborhood high school, largest high school in New Haven. They have a national award-winning culinary program. She's a chemistry teacher. Now, I remember chemistry. I hated chemistry. And I hated it because all we ever did was balance equations. So terribly boring. I never saw the relevance of chemistry in my life. She saw that as well as a first-year core member. And this is the beauty of the folks that we recruit, because they want to have impact, immediate impact. And she was teaching as a first-year core member, decided, I need to create a culinary chemistry class. That's how these students, my students, are going to learn chemistry. And I tell you, if I had a culinary chemistry class, I would have blown that class out of the water. Because who doesn't want to cook and bake and make things that taste right? And so she's thriving, and the kids are thriving, and the kids are engaged. Why? Because she created a course with them at the center to help them understand chemistry. And I say that to say it's so important for us to be thinking about what kids need. And I'll tell you, they want meaning, they want connections, they want their schooling to translate into something. They want real world connections, and people who are doing that right and doing it well are meeting a lot of success. And they're having kids who are engaged, and they're having kids who are showing up for class, and they're having kids who are interested. Versus the other kind of experience, which I'm sure all of us in this room have had, which drives us away. We don't want to be involved, don't show up for school, and that's not the answer either.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all for sharing that. I see a common thread that, and it's actually refreshing to hear that really people and the interests of students is still at the center of strategies and innovations that will work then and now. So thank you all for sharing that. I want to give about 10 minutes to the audience to ask questions. Maybe we can just have folks raise their hand and then speak loudly. Yeah, in the back.
So I couldn't actually pick which one of you to address. It's so wonderful to hear a TFA voice because we've had a mixed bag experience in my 3 districts with core members, and then we've had great ones. So the fact that you're offering so much support is incredible to hear, and recruiting other people from education. My overall question would be, why is that not happening on a public scale? Because I left New Haven because of burnout. That's just what happens with a lot of people. Knowing that a lot of them are underprepared because they're not getting the support that they need or the play to be able to have those social emotional experiences going forward, or the AI panel that was upstairs that was talking about how to support AI in the classroom, and yet saying that they're asking for bigger members, not being the ones to volunteer to support a media literacy curriculum. So I'm not sure which angle to hit, but anybody can talk on whatever you feel.
If you don't mind. So look, we want Finland results, but we don't put in the Finland investments.
Yes.
Or Singapore. I didn't even have the mic on. I don't need it because that's how passionate I can. Look, and I've talked to the Minister of Education in Finland. I've talked to the Minister of Education in Singapore. Singapore, is, by the way, is the size of Danbury High School, the population. So the bottom line is you get out what you put in. If we don't see education, childcare, early childhood education as a value, we shouldn't complain later when it's inconsistent. Public education is the great equalizer. It's our best defense in this country. Yet, similar to the model that she was describing, if those making decisions don't rely on public education, public universities, childcare, public systems, public healthcare, then it may not be a priority. Our country's growth, our country's standing in the world depends on it. We've normalized teachers making 24% less than people with similar degrees in other professions. We've normalized teachers driving Ubers, being bartenders for second jobs, second income. Why? Because 75% of them are women? I feel for those teachers that get drive-by training on restorative practices and are expected to be an expert the next day. I was a part of a system that perpetuated that because we were counting minutes. If we don't treat them like professionals, if we don't treat it like a profession, then we're going to struggle to fill classrooms. When I became Secretary of Education, only 46% of the schools in this country were open. The first issue that I had is teachers were leaving the profession. What did we do? We said we got to start paying student teachers. Name another profession where you work for 4 months for free, and then people wonder why there's no black or brown people in it. So we went from 0 states to 47 states with paid teacher apprenticeships by the time I left office. I can't, as secretary, increase teacher salaries, but I can push governors to do it. I could embarrass states that are paying their teachers $36,000 a year where a gallon of milk still costs $5. I can't change those policy, and rightfully so. Those are states and local decisions. But I can forgive debt for public servants, which teachers are, which nurses are, which police officers are, which firefighters are. The same people we called essential 6 years ago, people had a problem when their debts were relieved so they could serve the public making 24% less. So I don't want to talk about the the day-to-day without saying the context that we're living in. We don't value the profession. So if we're serious about finding solutions, and don't get me wrong, there's issues that need to be addressed in well-funded systems too. But I'm tired of these comparisons of how these other countries do it. They value education. The Minister of Education in Finland, she was like, we don't test a lot. We give teachers time to learn and work together and grow and feel a sense of community to build their professional development. Higher education doesn't cost them a lifetime of debt to get better at what they do for kids. We need to shift the paradigm. And we need to recognize, instead of blaming public education, let's invest in it and make sure that it's working. For every ounce of support you put in it, put an ounce of accountability. I'm good with that. But don't lead with accountability and don't put support and then point fingers. It's having a disproportionate effect on students furthest from opportunity. Because the kids with opportunity, not the Miguel Cardonas 45 years ago, the kids furthest from opportunity have only what's left in the public schools. Those with resources can pick and choose. Empower to them. But if this country is going to grow and be, the best country in the world, which it is, we have to recognize that those public systems of education, of access to higher education, cannot be determined by race or place. And I think until we have those tough conversations, we're just going to be dancing on the edges of the dance floor.
A terrific panel. Thank you so much. Really extraordinary. Is anyone familiar with the Alpha School? I just heard a podcast. No. Okay. And then the second question I have is for you, Dolores. As a graduate of TFE, thank you very much. There was a lot of friction back then between certain public schools not welcoming TFA students, despite the extraordinary, track record that you had. Has that changed over the last 10 years?
So I remember when Teach for America came to Connecticut. I was in the room as an administrator. And unfortunately, the presentation didn't land well for me. It didn't land well for me as an African-American woman from New Haven Public Schools, sitting there being told that somebody's going to do this better than those of us who have been in the trenches. And so I've had my own reckoning. I had my own experiences with Teach for America. Some of my son's best teachers were Teach for America Corps members. I came to, and I know in this state how the relationship between I had to kind of go on an apology tour when I came into this role, and I know that I've used my relationships to repair harm that has happened. I have shifted the recruitment model in Connecticut. One of the things that I was really curious about, because I negotiated the contract for Teach for America when I was in New Haven Public Schools as chief of staff. And my question was, why are you always recruiting people from outside of the community to the community, and then they leave, and then they're gone? And it wasn't until I came to Teach for America that I realized the recruitment model. The recruitment model is you recruit at the flagship schools in the state. For us, that's Yale and UConn. We get a lot of people into Teach for America from Yale and UConn. Guess what? They're not interested in staying in Connecticut. Okay? So I also learned that visual that you experience in the school of a Teach for America Corps member coming in and having a fabulous experience, and then after 2 years they go away, we never knew where they went. They just left. And you can imagine the damage and the hurt that leaves behind. What I have since learned is that the majority of people who do Teach for America stay in education. What do? They go home. They see the impact that they've delivered in that community, and they want to have that same impact in their own community. That's why I shifted to local recruitment. Because I said, if we can recruit people who graduate from New Haven, Hartford, Bridgeport, Waterbury, Stanford Public Schools back to New Haven or stay in New Haven, then they just stay. But that requires partnership with organizations like New Haven Promise, Hartford Youth Scholar, who have the relationships with the folks, bring them back. They are staying, and I'm happy to say that I put a pause on the core. The first year core members 2024s, all of them, 100% of them stayed in their schools, no matter how challenging it was. And they're staying in there in their second year. Now, I will put that data up against anyone in their first year and second year retention of early educators. But there's all kinds of supports that I've talked about that we're able to provide that all early educators. So yes, the tide is shifting. The tide is shifting here in Connecticut. The majority of our core members, who are our teachers, come from Connecticut. The majority of our core members are children. Sorry, they're not children, they're grown adults. The majority of them are people of color. The majority of them are first in family going to school, all of the things. And it has shifted how people are seeing Teach for America here in Connecticut. I hope that answered your question.
Thank you.
Here's one more question. Yeah, go ahead.
I work at the Connecticut Science Center. We talk a lot about science and education, and science and education are both under fire a little bit right now. And as you guys are looking at the systems that we're putting teachers and putting students or teachers to work in and pushing students through, and we're in this space to talk about innovation in biotech and AI and emerging tech. What do the systems need, from your perspective, from early childhood on up, to change in order to better prepare students to be innovative and ready for this world we don't fully have a sense of yet? Because in a lot of ways, instruction hasn't shifted that much. We've talked about inquiry and project-based learning, but a lot of underfunded, under-resourced schools, that's not always the case to make that kind of transformative shift. So how can we adjust the system?
Yeah, I can take that one because this is something I feel really passionate about. When you work in early childhood education, there's often an assumption that you need to learn from the practices in K through 12 schools. I would argue that often the opposite is the case. The kind of play-based, hands-on learning that you see in early childhood education, that's not just the way kids learn. That's the way everybody learns. So when you were talking about culinary chemistry, right? We have children who are learning about food by cultivating gardens in educators' backyards. Again, we have children who are learning about math by setting the table and counting forks. We have children who are reading books and then telling the stories that come out of those books. The way that we work with children when they are young, engaging their senses, building on their interests, seeing them as full humans that we are trying to develop, that's what every student needs. And, by the way, just to get to your earlier question about scale, we see educators doing this all over the country. We're just not supporting them in doing it. We've taken the All Our Kin model to Nebraska and Kansas City and Philadelphia and California, and there are family child care educators everywhere doing these practices with kids and being told, you need to be more like K through 12. And I think K through 12 needs to be listening more to early childhood education.
I agree with that. I'd like to comment on that from a different perspective. Indulge me for a second. I think we're at the cusp of making some very serious errors in this country if we don't approach science differently. I want to take you back to last year, I think the 12-Day War, when there was an attack on Iran's nuclear scientific facilities, right? The U.S., but before that, Israel attacked their scientific facilities, right? Because if you want to prevent a future attack, you attack the science that's developing the technology that can harm you later, right? I share that to share that in this country, we are starving science. we are starving our higher education institutions from the scientific research dollars that we need to keep us where we are in this country. I told you I spoke to the Singapore and Finland ministers of education. You know what they said to me? We beat you in NAEP all the time. But why is it that the innovations come from America? Our highest performing kids want to go to your schools. Why? And I share that to share what roles science have. We are doing our enemies' work for them when we starve our places of research, our higher education institutions that are creating the next thing, which is, we're at Yale at an innovation summit. I remember last year I was doing a fellowship at Harvard when they got hit with a $500 million levy. They were robbed $500 million for scientific research. That impacts scientific research. If that's the mentality we're going to have in this country, our stock is going to go down a lot quicker. So that's the context under which and I appreciate what you do and Matt, and I know how you're lifting up the importance of science for our youngsters in the state. I benefited from visiting the Science Center. If you haven't gone, go check it out. So what I position, I don't want to just do doom and gloom. Here's the path forward. How do you position what you're doing as part of not only good for kids to make goop or to do whatever, but to say our country's prosperity relies on science, and you could be a scientist. There's economic value to having to being a scientist, to inventing the next thing, or to creating. So if we don't put a sense of prosperity of this country, what this country was founded on, and the ideals of this country connected to what you do, you have to make that why. And if you don't make an economic case for the work you do in building future scientists who will someday invent the cure for cancer, who will someday invent the next big thing, if people don't see in the Connecticut Science Center that you're contributing to that, and that's worth fighting for, that's worth funding, you're going to get swooped into the things that get cut because it's not important. So how you position the important work you do in the context of what we're trying to do as a state and as a country, if you're not able to do that, I worry. Just like public education, if I don't make a case that a good college career program is going to lead to Connecticut's economic stability and viability, and we're not going to lose defense contracts to Rhode Island or Virginia, who are also doing college and career pathways, if I don't make a case that this makes economic sense, then we're not going to invest in it. I argue that in the sciences, we have an opportunity to position it as not only part of our national defense, but our economic stability as a country. I know that's a 100,000-foot view, but I really need you to think about how important your role is, your voice is to that conversation here in Connecticut and nationally.
Okay, to not end on doom and gloom, and it's going to have to be a quick 30 seconds